A Hell's Angel found his pregnant sister abandoned on the road. Her little boy was protecting her, and his heart broke. The sun hung low over the county road, painting everything gold and orange. Tank Morrison leaned into the curve on his Harley, feeling the engine hum beneath him like an old friend. This road home was the same one he took every night, past Miller's cornfield, past the old grain silo that had been rusting since before he was born, past the spot where the trees opened up and you could see the hills turning purple in the fading light. He should have felt good. He had put in a solid day at the shop, elbow deep in a transmission that had fought him for hours before finally giving up its secrets. His hands still smelled like grease and metal. There was something honest about that smell. Something that made sense. But lately, the quiet had started to feel heavier than it used to. Tank was 45 years old. He had spent almost 20 of those years wearing the patch, rising up through the ranks until he became VP of his chapter, a position he had earned through loyalty and grit rather than words. His brothers respected him. Men twice as mean as him stepped careful around his opinion. He had built something real with the club, a brotherhood that had saved his life more than once. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story, but when he pulled into his driveway each night, the house was empty. No noise. No mess. No one waiting up, just him. A couch that had molded to his shape, and a television he barely watched anymore. He thought about his sister sometimes, more than he let anyone know. Callie, baby sister with the crooked smile and the laugh that used to fill up every room she walked into. 8 years now since she had looked him in the eye and told him she didn't want a criminal for a brother. 8 years since he had said something back he still regretted, something sharp and final that he could never quite take back no matter how many times he replayed it in his head. He wondered sometimes if she had kids, if she was happy, if she ever thought about him the way he thought about her. The wind picked up, cool against his face, snapping him out of his thoughts. Dusk was sliding into true dark now, the sky bruising purple then navy at the edges. His headlight cut a pale cone through the gathering gloom, catching bugs that flickered like sparks in the beam. That was when he saw it, a shape in the road ahead. Small, upright, not moving the way a deer moves, not swaying the way a mailbox might in the wind. Tank eased off the throttle, squinting through his visor. The shape sharpened as he closed the distance. It was a child, a little boy, standing dead center in the lane, gripping a broken tree branch in both hands like it was a sword. His chin was lifted, but Tank could see it trembling even from 30 yards off. Tank braked, slow and steady, until the bike rolled to a stop a dozen feet from the boy. He raised both hands off the handlebars, showing empty palms, and cut the engine. The silence that followed felt enormous. "Hey there," Tank said, keeping his voice low and even, the same tone he used on spooked dogs and skittish new prospects. "You okay, little man?" The boy didn't answer. He just widened his stance, planting himself between Tank and something behind him in the ditch. Something Tank couldn't quite see yet in the dying light. "You're not gonna hurt her." The boy shouted, voice cracking with a fierceness that didn't match his size. Tank's stomach dropped. Slowly, carefully, he swung his leg over the bike and lowered the kickstand. He kept his hands raised as he stepped closer, close enough now to see past the boy's shoulder into the gravel ditch beyond. A woman lay curled there, unmoving. Her clothes were torn and dirty. Dark bruises marked her arms. Her belly, round and swollen with the unmistakable shape of late pregnancy, rose and fell with shallow, ragged breaths. Tank knelt down, heart hammering now, and reached out to brush the hair back from her bruised face. The world stopped. It was Callie. Tank knelt in the gravel, and for a second the whole world went quiet, except for the sound of his own heart slamming against his ribs. Callie, his baby sister. Right here, curled up small in a ditch like a piece of trash somebody threw out the car window. His hands hovered over her, not sure where it was safe to touch. She had a bruise blooming dark along her cheekbone. Her lip was split. And her belly, round and full underneath her thin jacket, rose and fell with shallow breaths that scared him more than anything else he'd seen tonight. The memory hit him before he could stop it. 8 years ago. His mother's kitchen table, the good china rattling because his father had slammed his fist down on it. "You wear that patch. You're no son of mine." And Callie, 20 years old and scared, standing behind their parents with her arms crossed, refusing to meet his eyes. "You did this to yourself, Tank. Don't ask me to pick a side. You already picked yours." She'd meant it. She'd walked out with their parents that night, and she hadn't looked back. Not for birthdays, not for the funeral when their dad passed 3 years later. Nothing, just silence, year after year, until the silence became its own kind of wall, one Tank told himself he didn't care about anymore. He'd been lying to himself. He understood that now, looking at her broken and small in the dirt. "Get away from her." Dominic's voice cracked with the effort of sounding brave. The stick trembled in his small hands, but he didn't back down, didn't even blink. He'd planted himself right between Tank and his mother, like he weighed 200 pounds instead of 40. Tank held both hands up, palms out, slow and easy, the same way he'd calm a spooked horse or a nervous rookie at the shop. Hey, buddy, I'm not gonna hurt her. I promise you that." "You're lying." Grown-ups always lie. Dominic's chin wobbled, but his eyes stayed fierce, locked on Tank like he was the only thing standing between his mama and the whole rotten world. "I'm not lying, son." Tank kept his voice low and steady, the kind of voice he used with brothers coming down off a bad high or a bad memory. "You're doing a real good job protecting your mom. That's real brave. But she needs help right now, okay? She needs a doctor, or she needs somebody who loves her to get her someplace warm and safe. I promise you, on my life, I am not here to hurt either one of you." Dominic's arms shook. Tears cut clean lines through the dirt on his cheeks. "She won't wake up," he whispered, and just like that the fierce little guard dog cracked open into a scared little boy. "She won't wake up, and I don't know what to do." "I know, buddy, I know." Tank's own throat went tight. "But I do, okay? I know exactly what to do. Will you let me help her?" It took a long moment. The stick lowered an inch. Then, another. Finally, Dominic stepped aside, and something about the way he did it, resigned and exhausted, aged way past his 6 years, broke something loose in Tank's chest. He moved to Callie's side and gathered her up as gently as he could manage, one arm under her knees, one behind her shoulders, mindful of the swell of her belly. She was lighter than she should have been. Too light. Her eyelids fluttered. For 1 second, her eyes opened, unfocused, glassy with pain and confusion. "Tank?" she whispered, so soft he almost missed it. Just his name, like a question she wasn't sure she believed the answer to. Then her eyes rolled back, and she went limp again in his arms. "I got you," he said anyway, even though she couldn't hear him anymore. "I got you, Cal." He heard an engine coming down the road and flagged it down without thinking twice, one arm still cradling his sister. It was Griff's old pickup, headlights cutting through the dusk. Griff leaned out the window, took one look at the scene, and didn't ask a single question, just threw the passenger door open. As Tank laid Callie across the bench seat, she stirred again, mumbling, frantic and slurred. "No, not the police, please, not the police." Tank froze, staring down at his sister's battered face, Dominic's small hand gripping the hem of his jacket, and made his decision right then. No hospital. Not yet. The clubhouse door slammed open with a bang that echoed off the concrete walls, and every head in the main room turned at once. Bear was the first on his feet, beer bottle forgotten on the pool table. "Tank. What the hell?" Tank didn't answer. He couldn't. His arms were full of his sister, her body limp and light in a way that scared him more than any fight he'd ever been in. Behind him, Dominic clung to the back of his jacket with both small fists, his sneakers scuffing against the floor as he half walked, half ran to keep up. "Get the back room cleared," Tank said. His voice came out rough, cracked at the edges. Now, nobody argued. That was the thing about his brothers. They could read a man's face, and whatever they saw on Tank's face right then sent three of them scrambling toward the hallway, knocking over a folding chair, sweeping old boxes and a broken jukebox out of the spare room like it was on fire. "Who is that?" Someone whispered. "Don't know. Never seen her before. Little boy's terrified. Look at him." Tank laid Callie down on the old couch they'd dragged into the cleared room, someone already throwing a clean blanket over the cushions first. Her head lolled to the side, dirt streaked one cheek. Her lip was split and swollen, and there was a bruise blooming purple and green along her jaw that made Tank's stomach twist into a hard knot. "Somebody get Donna," he barked. "Now, not tomorrow." Now Bear was already on his phone, pacing near the doorway, voice low and urgent. Dominic hadn't let go of Tank's jacket. The boy stood pressed against his leg, staring at his mother on the couch, at the strange room full of leather vests and tattooed arms, at the low light and the smell of motor oil and old cigarettes. His chin trembled, but he didn't cry. He just watched, the way a kid watches when he's learned that crying doesn't fix anything. Tank crouched down to his level, slow, careful, the way you'd approach a spooked animal. "Hey, buddy, you're safe here. I promise you that." Dominic's eyes, red-rimmed and huge, flicked up to him. "Is my mom gonna be okay?" "She's gonna be just fine," Tank said, and he prayed to whatever was listening that it was true. "We're gonna take real good care of her. And you too." The front door banged open again 10 minutes later, and Donna Reyes came through it with a canvas bag slung over her shoulder, her husband Whitey trailing behind her still buttoning his shirt. She didn't waste time on questions. She went straight to the couch, dropped to her knees, and got to work with the calm, practiced hands of someone who'd spent 20 years as an ER nurse before she'd married into this life. "Pulse is steady," she muttered, mostly to herself, pressing 2 fingers to Callie's wrist. She lifted an eyelid, checked her pupils, ran gentle hands along Callie's swollen belly, listening. Feeling. The room had gone dead silent, a dozen grown bikers standing frozen in the doorway like boys waiting outside the principal's office. "Baby's moving," Donna said after a long moment, and a ragged breath went around the room like everyone had been holding it at once. Good, strong kicks. Mama's exhausted. Dehydrated, underweight for how far along she is. I'd guess 7 months. Maybe close to it. She looked up at Tank, her eyes sharp. She's been starving herself. Or somebody's been starving her. This isn't just from tonight. Tank's jaw tightened so hard it ached. Callie stirred then, a small sound escaping her throat, her eyelids fluttering. Donna leaned in close. Callie? Honey, can you hear me? You're safe. You're okay. Callie's eyes opened, unfocused at first, drifting around the unfamiliar room, the strange faces, until they landed on Tank kneeling beside her. For a long moment she just stared, like she thought she might be dreaming. Then her face crumpled, and she burst into tears, reaching for him with a shaking hand. Tank, she sobbed. Tank, you're really here. The room smelled like clean sheets and old wood smoke. Someone had found a quilt from somewhere, blue with faded stars stitched across it, and tucked it around Callie's shoulders like she was made of glass. Maybe she was. Tank sat in a folding chair pulled close to the bed, his big hands hanging between his knees, not sure what to do with them now that he wasn't carrying anyone. Callie's eyes were open now. Really open. Not the glassy half-focus from before, but clear and wet and fixed on his face like she was trying to memorize it all over again. Tank, she whispered. Her voice cracked on the single word. I'm so sorry. Hey. Hey, none of that. He leaned forward, but she shook her head hard, and the tears spilled over before she could stop them. No, I need to say it. She pressed a hand to her chest like the words hurt coming out. 8 years. I let 8 years go by. I told myself you made your choice, that I had to make mine, that Mom and Dad were right about you and your life. I said things I didn't mean. I let you become a stranger to me, Tank, and I hated myself for it every single day, and I still didn't call. Her shoulders shook. Dominic, curled against her side under the quilt, lifted his head and looked at Tank with those same fierce, wary eyes he'd had out on the road, like he was still deciding if this giant man in leather was a threat to his mama. It's okay, Mama, Dominic said quietly, patting her arm the way a grown man might comfort someone, not a 6-year-old boy. Don't cry. Tank's chest tightened at the sight of it. A child comforting his mother instead of the other way around. That wasn't right. That wasn't how it was supposed to be. Cal, Tank said, low and steady, you don't owe me an apology. You hear me? Not one word of it. I'm the one who should have come looking. I let pride get in my way same as you did. That's on both of us, and we're not going to waste another minute on it. Okay? She nodded, but the tears kept coming, quiet now, just sliding down her face while she stared at the quilt like she could find the right words hidden in the stitching. Why were you out there, Callie? Tank asked gently. On that road, alone like that. Dominic's small body went rigid against her side. Callie's hand found his hair and smoothed it down, an old habit, something automatic and soothing for them both. I couldn't stay, she said finally, the words coming slow, like each one cost her something. I couldn't. It wasn't safe. Not for the baby. Not anymore. Her hand dropped to the curve of her belly, resting there. I kept telling myself it would get better. That I was imagining things. But then I started thinking about what would happen after she's born, and I just... She stopped, swallowing hard. I grabbed Dominic and I ran. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have money, barely had gas in the car before it broke down. I just knew I couldn't let anything happen to my kids. Who? Tank said, and his voice had changed, gone flat and hard in a way that made Dominic flinch. Who do I need to go talk to, Callie? She went quiet. Her eyes flicked toward the doorway, where Bear and two other brothers stood filling up the frame, arms crossed, faces solemn. Then, back to Tank. I can't, she whispered. Not yet. Please don't ask me that yet. Tank wanted to push. Every instinct in his body screamed to push, to get a name, an address, something he could turn into action. But he saw the way her hands trembled against Dominic's hair, saw the boy's eyes darting between the adults like he expected the world to break apart again any second, and he swallowed it down. Okay, Tank said instead. He reached out, slow and careful, and rested his hand over hers on the quilt. Okay, you don't gotta say anything else tonight. But hear me, Callie Jo. You and this boy and that baby girl coming, you're not alone anymore. Not for one single second. Whatever it is, whoever it is, we are not letting anything touch you again. That's not a promise. That's a fact. From the doorway, low and rumbling, Bear's voice rose in agreement. Damn right. The other brothers murmured behind him, a wall of quiet, fierce assent, leather and ink and scarred knuckles standing guard like something ancient and unbreakable had just been sworn into being. Dominic looked up at all of them, at the strangers filling the doorway, and for the first time since the road, some of the fear in his small face began, just slightly, to ease. Morning light poured through the clubhouse windows, and with it came a kind of noise Tank hadn't heard in that building in years. Not shouting. Not engines. Voices, women's voices, laughing in the kitchen, the clink of dishes, the squeak of a screen door opening and closing again and again. Tank stood in the hallway rubbing the sleep out of his eyes, still in yesterday's shirt, and stared at the sight in front of him like he'd woken up in the wrong house. The long table in the common room, usually covered in poker chips and empty beer bottles, was now packed with foil trays. Casseroles, a ham. Something that smelled like cornbread. Bear's wife, Marisol, was unpacking a box of baby clothes, still folded with the tags on. Donna Reyes stood near the stove, stirring a pot of something that smelled like chicken soup, her sleeves rolled up like she'd done this 100 times before, because she had. Where did all this come from? Tank asked, voice still rough with sleep. Donna didn't even look up. Phone tree. Tank, you didn't think we'd just sit around, did you? Near the far wall, propped against a stack of folded blankets, sat a crib. An actual crib. White wood, slightly scuffed but sturdy, with a hand-lettered sign taped to the side that said for the baby in blue marker. Tank didn't ask where it came from. Someone's garage, probably. Someone's guilt, probably, turned into something good. He found Callie sitting up in the back room, propped against pillows, staring at all of it with an expression Tank couldn't quite name. Somewhere between disbelief and terror and something warmer underneath. They didn't have to do this, she said quietly. They wanted to, Tank said. That's how we do things around here. Dominic wasn't in the room. Tank found him a minute later, out near the garage bay, standing just outside the doorway with his back pressed to the wall, watching the men move around like he was still deciding if any of this was safe. Bear noticed him first. Bear was the biggest man in the club, built like a doorframe, arms covered in ink, a beard that could have hidden a bird's nest. He should have been the scariest man Dominic had ever seen. Instead, he crouched down low, so his eyes were level with the boy's, and held out something small in his open palm. A toy motorcycle. Die-cast metal, black and chrome, a little rusted at the wheels but polished up as best it could be. "Found this in my old toolbox," Bear said, voice low and easy, like he was talking to a scared cat. "Used to be mine when I was your age. Figured it needed a new owner." Dominic didn't move for a long moment. His eyes flicked from the toy to Bear's face, searching for the trick, the catch, the thing that always came before something bad happened. But Bear just waited. Patient, still holding it out. Finally, slowly, Dominic reached out and took it. "You know how to make the wheels spin?" Bear asked. Dominic shook his head, just barely. Bear grinned and showed him, spinning the little wheel with one thick finger, the sound a tiny whir against his palm. Dominic's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Not yet. It took another hour. Bear sat with him on an overturned crate near the garage, showing him how the toy's kickstand folded down, letting him roll it along the concrete floor, making low, rumbling engine noises that seemed to loosen something in the boy's shoulders. Later, one of the wives came out carrying a tiny leather vest, cut down small, patches sewn on crooked, but careful. Someone had stayed up half the night sewing it by hand. She knelt down and helped Dominic into it, and he stood there, looking down at himself like he'd been handed a superhero cape. "Look at you," Bear said, whistling low. "You're one of us now." And that was when it happened. Dominic laughed. It came out small at first, a startled little huff like it surprised him just as much as anyone. Then it grew, bright and real, as Bear scooped him up onto his shoulders and jogged a slow lap around the garage, engines humming somewhere in the background, brothers looking up and grinning at the sound of a child's laughter, filling a space that hadn't heard one in a long, long time. Callie stood on the porch, wrapped in a blanket someone had draped over her shoulders, watching through the open bay doors. Her hand rested on her belly, and there were tears on her face, but she was smiling too, cautious and disbelieving, like she was afraid the moment might shatter if she looked at it too hard. Tank stood beside her, arms crossed, throat tight. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt it. Purpose, not the kind that came from a job or a debt owed, but the kind that came from knowing exactly where he was supposed to be. The kitchen smelled like onions and butter and the good kind of noise, the kind that comes from a big pot of stew and too many people who care about you crammed around one table. Donna had made enough food for 20 men, which was about right, since 20 men kept wandering through looking for a plate. Dominic sat at the end of the table in his little leather vest, swinging his legs, dunking a piece of bread into his bowl like he'd been doing it his whole life instead of just one day. Tank waited until the boy's eyes got heavy, until Bear scooped him up with a promise of cartoons in the back room, before he leaned forward and set his elbows on the table. Callie, she looked up from her bowl. She hadn't eaten much. Her hand still trembled a little when she lifted the spoon, and Tank noticed, the way he noticed everything now, like his whole body had turned into one big nerve tuned only to her. "I need a name," he said, quiet, careful, the way you'd talk to a spooked animal you didn't want to send running. Callie's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. "Tank, I'm not gonna do anything stupid. I promise you that." He held up his hands, the same way he had on the road, palms out, harmless, But I can't protect you from a ghost. I need to know who did this. The table had gone quieter than he meant for it to. Sam sat across from them, notebook closed, but pen still in his hand, like he already knew this was the moment that mattered. Donna had stopped clearing dishes. Even the low hum of conversation from the main room seemed to fade, like the whole clubhouse was leaning in to listen. Callie's fingers tightened around the spoon. It doesn't matter who it is. It matters to me. Tank's voice stayed soft, but there was iron underneath it now. You're my sister. That baby in you is my family. That boy sleeping down the hall calls me nothing yet, but I already feel like his uncle. I am not going to sit here and pretend I don't need to know who put bruises on you. Callie's eyes dropped to the table. Her jaw worked like she was chewing on the words before she'd let them out, testing them, deciding if they were safe. You'll do something, she whispered. You'll try to hurt him. And then everything gets worse. That's how it always goes. Not this time. You don't know that. Callie. Tank reached across the table, laid his big scarred hand flat next to hers, not touching, just close enough that she'd know it was there if she needed it. Look at me. I have spent 8 years wondering if you were okay. 8 years, not knowing if you were alive some nights. I am not going anywhere, and I am not doing anything without thinking it through first. But I can't help you if you keep protecting the man who did this to you. Her chin trembled. For a second she looked exactly like Dominic had out on that road. Small and scared and trying so hard to be brave. He's not just some man, she said, so quiet Tank almost missed it. Then who is he? The silence stretched. Somewhere down the hall the television murmured cartoon voices and Bear's low laugh rumbled through the wall. Callie's eyes filled, spilled over, and she wiped at them fast, like she was angry at herself for crying. Ray, she said. Ray Holloway. Tank frowned. The name rattled something loose in his memory, but he couldn't place it yet. My husband, Callie said, and her voice cracked wide open. Deputy Ray Holloway. He's a sheriff's deputy. Tank, everybody in 3 counties knows him. Everybody loves him. He gave a speech at the school last year about keeping kids safe. She let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. That's the man who did this. Nobody said anything. Sam's pen had gone still in his hand. Donna stood frozen by the sink, dish towel forgotten over her shoulder. Tank felt the words land in his chest like a fist, felt every plan he'd already started building in his head crumble to dust. A cop. Not just a cop. A decorated one. A man with a badge, a gun, and the whole department behind him. This wasn't a fight Tank could win by kicking down a door. The garage smelled like motor oil and cold coffee. Tank sat on an overturned bucket, elbows on his knees, staring at a wrench he wasn't using. The single bulb overhead buzzed and flickered, throwing long shadows across the tools hanging on the pegboard wall. Everyone else had gone to bed hours ago. The clubhouse had finally gone quiet, but Tank's mind wouldn't stop. A deputy. His sister had married a deputy. He picked up the wrench, turned it over in his hands, then set it down hard on the workbench. The sound cracked through the empty garage like a gunshot. Ray Holloway. Tank had heard the name before, actually. Folks around town talked about him like he was something special. Good deputy. Fair. Helped old Mrs. Patterson when her house got broken into last spring. Coached Little League on weekends. A pillar of the community, they'd say, shaking their heads admiringly. And he'd put his hands on Callie. Left her curled up in a ditch, 7 months pregnant, with a 6-year-old boy standing guard with a stick, because there was nobody else to protect her. Tank's hands curled into fists so tight his knuckles ached. He wanted to ride out right now. Find the man's house. Drag him out into his own front yard and show him what it felt like to be small and scared. It would be easy. Tank had done harder things with less reason. He knew exactly how satisfying it would feel, that first crack of knuckles against bone. The way rage could burn clean through a man until there was nothing left but the truth of what he deserved. But he made himself sit still, made himself breathe. Because he wasn't stupid, whatever people thought when they saw the patch on his back and the tattoos on his arms. He knew how this would go if he did what every cell in his body was screaming for. A deputy shows up, beaten in his own driveway, and it doesn't matter that he deserved it. It doesn't matter that Callie is the victim. Every cop in 3 counties would be looking for a reason to come down on the club, and Tank would be handing them one wrapped in a bow. Raids, warrants, trumped-up charges on brothers who had nothing to do with any of it. And worse, so much worse, a judge somewhere would look at Callie's file and see her hiding out with a motorcycle gang, led by the man who put a deputy in the hospital, and that judge would hand her babies straight back to their father, without blinking twice. Tank had seen it happen to other people. The system didn't care about truth. It cared about paperwork and appearances, and right now every appearance was stacked against them. He thought about Dominic, standing in the middle of that dark road with a stick raised over his head, chin trembling, refusing to move. 6 years old and already learning that the world wasn't safe, that grown men could hurt the people you loved and wear a badge while they did it. Tank couldn't fix that with his fists. As much as he wanted to, as much as every instinct screamed for it, this wasn't a fight he could win by riding and swinging. This one needed to be fought a different way. He pulled his phone from his jacket pocket and scrolled through the contacts until he found the name. Sam Whitfield. The kid had been fresh out of law school when the club helped him out of a jam a few years back. Some trouble with his old man's business partner trying to squeeze him out of an inheritance. Tank had made a few calls, leaned on a few people, and the whole mess disappeared. Sam had said then that he owed them one. Tank hadn't planned on cashing that in. Life had a way of surprising you. It was almost midnight, but Tank didn't hesitate. He hit call and put the phone to his ear, listening to it ring once, twice, 3 times. Hello, Sam's voice came through groggy, confused. Sam, it's Tank Morrison. There was a pause, the sound of sheets rustling, a man sitting up fast. Tank? Is everything okay? No, Tank said. But it's gonna be. I need your help with something. Legal, quiet, and I need it fast. Okay, Sam said, sounding more awake now. Tell me what's going on. Tank leaned back against the workbench, closed his eyes for a second, and started talking. This fight wasn't going to be won with fists. It was going to be won smart. Sam Whitfield's car was too clean for the clubhouse parking lot. It sat there among the growling Harleys and dusty pickups like a shiny penny dropped in a gravel pit, and Sam himself looked about the same way when he stepped out of it. He straightened his tie, then thought better of it and loosened it instead, glancing at the row of leather vests and tattooed arms leaning against the porch rail. Morning, he said, his voice cracking just a little. I'm Sam Whitfield. Tank called me. Bear was the one who answered, arms crossed over his chest like two tree trunks. "You the lawyer?" "That's me." Bear studied him for a long second, then broke into a grin that seemed to surprise Sam more than any glare could have. "Good. Callie's inside. Go easy on her. She's been through hell." Sam nodded and swallowed hard, then followed Tank through the clubhouse doors. Inside, the place smelled like coffee and bacon grease, and somewhere in the back, a baby monitor crackled with static from Donna checking on Callie earlier that morning. Callie sat at a scarred wooden table near the window, wrapped in a cardigan 2 sizes too big for her, her hands cupped around a mug of tea she wasn't drinking. Dominic was curled up on the couch nearby, working a small block of wood with a dull knife under Bear's careful supervision. But his eyes kept flicking toward his mother every few seconds, like he still didn't quite believe she'd stay put. "Callie," Tank said gently, "this is Sam. He's gonna help us. You can trust him." Callie looked up, and for a moment Sam saw something flicker behind her eyes. Something like a deer deciding whether to bolt. Then she nodded, slow and careful, and gestured to the chair across from her. Sam sat. He pulled out a legal pad instead of a laptop, something Tank had told him to do beforehand. "Keep it simple," Tank had said. "She doesn't need machines pointed at her. She needs somebody who'll listen." "I know this is hard," Sam said, his voice softer now, steadier. "You can take your time. You can stop whenever you need to. I just need you to tell me what happened, in your own words." Callie's fingers tightened around the mug. She looked over at Dominic, who was still whittling, still watching. Then she began to talk. She told Sam about the fights that started small, about the coldness that crept in after the wedding like frost on a window. She told him about the night Ray had grabbed her arm so hard it left a bruise she'd had to hide under a long-sleeve shirt for 2 weeks. She told him about the fear that had built up slowly, brick by brick, until she couldn't remember what it felt like not to be afraid. Her voice shook, but she kept going, and Sam wrote every word down, his pen scratching steadily against the paper. "I didn't leave sooner because I didn't think anyone would believe me," Callie said. "He's a deputy. Everybody loves him. Everybody thinks he's a good man." "I believe you," Sam said quietly. Callie looked at him for a long moment, like she was testing the words for cracks. Then something in her shoulders loosened. Just a little. "There's more," she said. "I have proof." Sam's pen stopped moving. "Proof?" Callie stood, crossing to the corner of the room where a battered canvas bag sat against the wall. The same bag Dominic had dragged out into the night with them, small and stubborn, refusing to let go of it even when Tank had offered to carry it. She unzipped it and pulled out a worn spiral notebook, its pages soft and curled from handling, and beneath it, a fat envelope stuffed with photographs. "I started writing things down about 2 years ago," Callie said, setting the notebook on the table like it was something fragile. "Dates. What happened. What he said. And I took pictures too. Whenever I could, whenever it was safe." She opened the envelope with trembling hands, and photographs spilled out. Bruised arms, a cracked phone screen, a broken lamp, a chipped tooth. "I kept it all in case anyone ever asked me to prove it." Sam stared down at the pile, his eyes widening as he flipped through page after page of careful, dated entries, photograph after photograph of quiet, damning evidence. This wasn't just one woman's word against a well-liked deputy's reputation. This was a paper trail, a timeline, a case. "Callie," Sam said slowly, "this is exactly what we need. He gathered the notebook and photographs with careful hands, tucking them into a folder from his bag. I'm going to file for a protective order first thing tomorrow morning. With this, we have a real shot. The back room off the clubhouse kitchen had been storage for as long as anybody could remember. Old parts, busted crates, a pool table with one bad leg. Bear was the one who suggested clearing it out. Baby's gonna need a room, he said one morning, standing in the doorway with his arms crossed like he was already picturing it. Can't have a crib next to a beer fridge. Tank agreed without much thought. 2 days later, half the club showed up with tools. They worked through the weekend. Bear and a guy named Dutch, who used to do carpentry before the club took over his life, pulled apart old motorcycle crates and started sanding the wood down smooth. The rough pine turned soft and pale under their hands, and Dutch showed Tank how to notch the corners so a bookshelf would hold together without nails. Never thought I'd build furniture again, Dutch said, blowing sawdust off a shelf. Feels good, though, word got around town, the way it does in small places. A woman from the diner donated a rocking chair her kids had outgrown. The mechanic 2 streets over dropped off a crib still in its box, barely used, said his daughter didn't need it anymore. Donna showed up with bags of tiny clothes, soft yellow and green since nobody knew yet if the baby was a boy or a girl. Dominic took charge of supervising. He wore his little leather vest, the one Bear had gotten made special after the boy wouldn't stop talking about how cool everyone's jackets looked. It was too big in the shoulders, but he wore it every single day now, even to bed some nights, until Callie made him take it off. You're doing that wrong, Dominic told Bear, watching him try to hang a shelf. Bear paused, hammer in hand. Oh yeah? How am I doing it wrong? It's crooked. Bear stepped back and squinted at the shelf. It was, in fact, a little crooked. He laughed, a big rolling sound that seemed to shake the whole room. Well, look at that. Good eye, kid. Dominic beamed like he'd won a trophy. After that, he followed Bear everywhere, handing him nails, holding the level, announcing very seriously when something was not straight or too wobbly. The other brothers started asking him to check their work too, playing along, letting him strut around like a tiny foreman in an oversized vest. You're gonna put us all out of jobs, Dominic, one of them said. And the boy giggled so hard he had to sit down. Tank watched it happen from the doorway more than once, arms crossed, something warm sitting in his chest he didn't have a name for. 6 years old, and the kid still flinched at loud noises sometimes, still watched the door when someone new walked in. But here, in this room full of grease-stained men who used to scare people just by existing, Dominic was starting to laugh like a kid was supposed to laugh. By the end of the second week, the room didn't look like storage anymore. The walls were painted a soft cream color somebody had left over from another job. The crib sat under the window, matched with the rocking chair from the diner lady. Dutch had built a changing table out of the crate wood, sanded so smooth it looked store-bought. Little shelves lined one wall, already stocked with the donated clothes, folded neat by Donna's careful hands. Callie stood in the doorway the evening it was finished, one hand resting on her belly, the other pressed to her mouth. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Tank stood a few feet away, not sure what to do with his hands. Waiting, Tank, she finally said, voice thick. This is... She stopped, shook her head, tried again. I don't think I've felt safe like this in years, she said. Not since before Dominic was born, even. Not really. She looked around the room, at the crib, the little shelf of folded clothes, the rocking chair by the window catching the last of the evening light. Everybody just... Showed up, she said. They didn't even know me. They know you're mine, Tank said quietly. That's enough for them. Callie's eyes filled up, and she leaned into him, resting her head against his arm the way she used to when she was small and scared of thunderstorms. Tank stood still, letting her lean, feeling something settle into place inside him that had been missing for 8 long years. The sun was going down easy behind the trees, painting the sky orange and pink. Tank sat on the porch steps of the clubhouse, a bottle of root beer sweating in his big hand. Callie had asked for one instead of the beer the brothers drank, and nobody had blinked. She sat next to him now in an old lawn chair Bear had dragged out, one hand resting on her round belly. Inside, Dominic was asleep. Donna had checked on Callie twice already that day, and the baby was measuring right on time. For the first time in a long while, the house was quiet. That nursery, Callie said softly. I still can't believe you all did that. Tank shrugged, like it was nothing. Guys needed something to do with their hands. Wasn't hard. It was hard, Callie said. I saw Bear sanding that crib rail for 2 hours. He wanted it perfect. She looked over at Tank, studying his face in the fading light. You built me a family, Tank, when I didn't have one left. Tank didn't answer right away. He turned the bottle in his hands, watching the condensation drip onto the wood step. You had a family, he finally said. You just didn't think it counted. Callie flinched a little at that, but she didn't look away. That's not fair. Maybe not, Tank said. But it's true. The silence stretched between them, not angry, just heavy. Somewhere out past the fence, a dog barked twice and went quiet. Mom and Dad never forgave you for the patch, Callie said finally. They told me you'd end up dead in a ditch somewhere. Or in prison. They said if I kept seeing you, people would think less of me. Think I was that kind of family. And you believed them. I was scared, Tank, her voice cracked on his name. I was 19. You were riding around with guys covered in tattoos, getting in fights, and Mom cried every time your name came up. I didn't know how to hold on to you and hold on to them, too. So I picked the safe thing. Ray, Tank said. Callie nodded, staring out at the darkening yard. He had a badge, a steady paycheck. He shook Dad's hand, and Dad smiled for the first time in years. I thought that meant I was doing it right. I thought stability meant safety. She laughed, but it had no humor in it. Turns out, I traded one kind of scared for another. Tank set the bottle down on the step. I used to hate you for it, he said quietly. For 8 years, I told myself you picked them over me. Picked some deputy over your own brother. I built that story up so many times, I believed it like scripture. Tank. Let me finish. He looked at her now. Really looked. The way he hadn't let himself in years. I get it now. I do. You were a scared kid who got told her brother was trash, and you didn't have the tools to fight that. I wasn't there to give you any either. I was too busy proving Mom and Dad wrong to notice I was losing you along the way. Callie's eyes filled up, bright in the porch light. I should have called you, even once. Even just to hear your voice. Yeah, Tank said. You should have. I'm sorry, she whispered. I was wrong to cut you off. You were never the danger, Tank. I just needed someone to blame that wasn't me. Tank reached over and took her hand, rough fingers wrapping gentle around hers. I get the fear now, he said. More than I ever did before. Watching Dominic stand in that road with a stick? ready to take on a 300-pound biker to protect you? That's what fear does. It makes you do things you never thought you could. I don't blame you for running to whatever looked safe. I just wish it had been me. Callie let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and leaned into him. Tank wrapped his arm around her shoulders, careful of her belly, holding her the way he used to when she was small and scared of thunderstorms. "I've got you now," he murmured into her hair. "I've got you and Dominic and this baby. Nobody's taking that away again." Callie nodded against his shoulder, crying quietly into his shirt. Neither of them said Ray's name again that night, but it hung there anyway, unspoken, a shadow neither one was ready to face just yet. The cruiser showed up on a Tuesday. Tank noticed it first from the shop window, a white sedan with a light bar parked across the road from the clubhouse gates, half hidden under the shade of an oak tree. He didn't think much of it at first. Cops drove through this stretch of county road all the time. But the car didn't move. Not that afternoon, not the next morning when Tank rolled out on his bike to grab coffee, not 2 days later when Bear mentioned it too. "That's the 3rd day in a row," Bear said, leaning against the fence with his arms crossed, squinting at the car like he could see through the tinted windows. Same car. Same spot. Tank had already clocked the plate number in his head. He wasn't stupid. Somebody was watching them. It was on the 4th day that the deputy finally got out of his car. He was a lean man, younger than Ray, with a buzz cut and mirrored sunglasses that made him look like he'd practiced the pose in a mirror. He walked up the gravel drive slow and easy, like he had all the time in the world, thumbs hooked into his duty belt. Tank was outside working on a brother's carburetor when the man's shadow fell across the engine. "You must be Morrison," the deputy said. Tank didn't look up right away. He wiped his hands on a rag first, taking his time, then finally straightened to his full height. He had a good 6 inches on the deputy, and he let the silence stretch before he spoke. "That's right. And you are?" "Deputy Coy Bennett." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Friend of Ray Holloway's. Known him since the academy." There it was. Tank kept his face still as stone, the same way he'd learned to years ago in rooms full of men who wanted to see him flinch. Didn't know Ray had friends who liked sitting in cars all day, Tank said. Bennett's smile thinned out a little. "I hear you folks have been keeping his wife and kid here. That's a real generous thing to do. Real generous." He let the words sit a moment, like bait on a hook. Course, some might call it interfering in a domestic matter. That's a real gray area, legally speaking. Custody disputes, protective orders, all that paperwork can get complicated fast. Especially for folks with, let's say, colorful backgrounds. "She came here bleeding and pregnant," Tank said, voice low and even. "Wasn't no dispute. Wasn't no paperwork problem. Just a woman who needed help." Sure. Bennett held up his hands like he was agreeing, but his eyes stayed sharp behind the sunglasses. "I'm just saying, a place like this." He glanced toward the clubhouse. The row of motorcycles gleaming in the sun already's got a certain reputation with the department. Wouldn't take much for somebody to start asking questions. Warrants get pulled. Priors get looked at. Things can get messy for everybody, real quick. Tank felt the old anger rising in his chest, hot and familiar. The same anger that used to end in busted knuckles and worse. He thought of Dominic's small face, the boy's fierce eyes in the headlight beam that first night. He thought of Callie asleep in the back room. Finally. safe. He thought of Sam's careful, patient work building a case that could actually hold up in court. He swallowed the anger down. "Appreciate the warning, Deputy," Tank said, his voice flat and calm. "We'll keep that in mind." Bennett studied him a moment longer, like he was disappointed not to get a bigger reaction, then turned and walked back to his car without another word. Tank watched him go, watched the cruiser pull away in a slow roll down the county road, and didn't move until the taillights disappeared around the bend. That night, Tank called the brothers together in the main room. Every folding chair was full. Bear sat near the door, arms crossed. Even the younger prospects stood quiet along the back wall, sensing something serious was coming. "They're watching us," Tank said, standing at the front of the room. "Deputy came by today, made it real clear they're looking for a reason to shut us down, take Callie's boy, maybe worse." A low murmur went through the room. "So here's how it's gonna go," Tank said, his voice hard now. "Nobody touches that badge. Nobody so much as looks at him wrong. We keep everything clean. Every single thing. No fights, no mouthing off, no giving them a single excuse." Bear nodded slowly. "By the book." "By the book," Tank repeated. "We beat this with lawyers, not fists. That's the only way Callie keeps her kids safe." The room went quiet, the weight of it settling over every man there. One by one, they nodded, and the agreement passed through the room like a held breath finally released. The phone rang just after 9, cutting through the quiet of the clubhouse office. Tank picked it up on the second ring, still half thinking about the deputy who'd parked across the street 3 days running, watching the gates like he owned them. "It's Sam." Tank leaned back in his chair. The old springs groaned under his weight. "You got something?" "I got a lot of something. I've been going through Ray's precinct records for the custody case. You know, standard stuff, employment history, disciplinary file, that kind of thing. Wanted to show the court he's stable, good job, respected in the community. Make sure Callie doesn't look like she's making wild accusations against a pillar of the town." "And?" Sam's voice had a strange edge to it, careful, like he was picking his way across ice. "And it's not clean, Tank, not even close." Tank sat up straighter. "Talk to me." "Okay, so first thing, there's a string of internal complaints filed against 3 other deputies in that precinct, all within the last year and a half. Nothing that ever went anywhere. No hearings, no suspensions, nothing on the public record. They just sort of vanish. I only found them because a clerk friend of mine owed me a favor and pulled old case numbers that got flagged, then unflagged a week later. Vanish how? Like somebody made them vanish. Complaints about evidence handling, about missing property from evidence lockers. One about a deputy roughing up a suspect who later dropped all charges and moved out of state real quick. That's just the stuff I could find in an afternoon. Tank there could be more buried." Tank rubbed a hand over his jaw, feeling the rasp of his beard. "What's that got to do with Ray?" "That's the thing. His name doesn't show up on any of the complaints directly, but he's connected to 2 of the deputies involved, worked cases with them, signed off on some of their reports. And here's where it gets strange. I pulled his financials, just basic stuff, public record on property, and some court filings from years back. Ray's been making payments on a truck loan and some medical bills that don't match his salary. Nothing crazy, but it's more than a deputy's paycheck should cover comfortably, especially with Callie not working and a kid in the house." Tank felt something cold settle in his stomach. "You saying he's dirty?" I'm saying something doesn't add up. Could be nothing. Inheritance? A side job? I don't know. But combine that with the vanishing complaints and the fact that 2 of his closest work buddies have had accusations swept under the rug, and you've got a pattern that smells bad. Real bad. Tank was quiet for a moment, staring at the calendar tacked to the wall, at the grease-stained corner curling up from the heat of summer. So what are you telling me, Sam? Spell it out. I'm telling you this might not just be a guy who beats his wife and scares his kid. That's terrible enough on its own, don't get me wrong. But there might be something bigger going on here. Something involving his whole department. Corruption, cover-ups, maybe worse. And if that's true, Callie and Dominic might not just be victims of a bad marriage. They might be sitting on something dangerous without even knowing it. Tank felt his jaw tighten. You're telling me my sister could be in the middle of a mess way past some deputy losing his temper? I'm telling you, I don't know yet. But I put together what I found into a folder. I'm dropping it by tonight. I want you to look at it yourself before we decide what to do next. This isn't the kind of thing you rush into. All right, Tank said, voice low and even, though his mind was already racing. Bring it. An hour later, Sam showed up at the clubhouse gate, nervous as always around the rows of parked bikes and the big men lingering near the door, but steadier than he used to be. He handed Tank a thick manila folder without a word, like he was passing off something that might bite. Tank waited until Sam left before he sat down at the scarred wooden table in the back office, the one Bear used for paperwork nobody liked doing. He opened the folder slow, like it might be something that could go off in his hands. Pages of records. Photocopied complaint forms. Financial statements with numbers circled in red pen, a list of names, deputies, dates, cases that closed too fast or never closed at all. Tank stared at it all, the lamplight throwing long shadows across the table, and felt the ground shift under a story he thought he'd already understood. The morning of the hearing came gray and cold, with a thin mist hanging over the courthouse parking lot. Callie stood at the mirror in the clubhouse bathroom, smoothing down a blue blouse Donna had picked out for her. Her hands would not stop shaking. You look good, Donna said from the doorway. Strong, like a mama who knows what she wants. I don't feel strong, Callie whispered. Don't matter what you feel. Matters what you do. Donna squeezed her shoulder. And today, you're doing this. Outside, the parking lot was full of motorcycles. Tank had told his brothers to stay back, to keep their distance from the courthouse steps so as not to spook the judge or give Ray's lawyer ammunition. But he couldn't stop them from being there. Bear parked his bike across the street, arms crossed, watching every person who walked by. 3 other brothers sat on a bench near the fountain, looking like ordinary men in leather. But their eyes never stopped moving. Sam met Callie at the courthouse door, his tie a little crooked, a thick folder tucked under his arm. You ready? He asked. No, Callie said honestly. But let's go. Dominic held her hand tight as they walked inside. He wore his small leather vest over a collared shirt, an odd little combination that made him look braver than he felt. He had asked Tank that morning if the judge was going to take him away from his mama. Tank had knelt down and told him no, not ever, not while there was breath in his body. Dominic seemed to believe it. Mostly, the courtroom was smaller than Callie expected. Wood-paneled, quiet, smelling faintly of old paper. Judge Renata Cole sat behind the bench, reading glasses perched on her nose, her face unreadable. Sam stood and spoke first. His voice was calm, steady, without the nervous edge Callie had seen in him back at the clubhouse. He laid out the timeline. The bruises. The night Callie was found in the ditch, 7 months pregnant, unconscious, the photographs Callie had taken in secret, hidden on an old phone buried in a shoebox. The journal entries, dated and detailed, describing months of fear. "Your Honor," Sam said, "my client did not run from her marriage on a whim. She ran because she believed, with good reason, that her life and the life of her unborn child were in danger." Callie sat with her hands folded so tightly, her knuckles went white. She did not look at Ray's empty chair. His lawyer sat there instead, a thin man with tired eyes, offering only a brief, half-hearted argument about misunderstandings and marital stress. The judge asked Callie only a few questions. Simple ones. When did the abuse start? Why didn't you go to police? Callie answered in a voice that trembled at first, then grew steadier, like she was finding solid ground beneath her feet with every word. "He was a deputy," she said. "Who was I supposed to call?" The judge was quiet for a long moment after that. She looked through the folder again, slow and careful, her pen tapping once against the desk. "This court finds sufficient evidence to grant a temporary protective order," she finally said. "Effective immediately." The court also grants preliminary custody of the minor child, Dominic Holloway, to the mother, Callie Holloway, pending further review. Callie did not fully understand it was over until Sam turned to her, smiling, and said, "You did it." She stood on shaking legs. She thanked the judge in a whisper the woman probably didn't hear. Then, Sam guided her out of the courtroom, one hand light on her back, like he was afraid she might fall. Outside, the mist had burned off. The sun was breaking through gray clouds, throwing long strips of light across the courthouse steps. Callie stopped halfway down, and the sobs came without warning, tearing out of her chest like something she had been holding back for years. Dominic wrapped both arms around her leg and pressed his face into her hip. "Mama, it's okay," he said. "It's okay. We won." Callie sank down and pulled him into a hug, crying into his hair, laughing through the tears at the same time. Across the street, Bear straightened up from his bike, and one by one, the brothers stood, watching quietly, giving the moment its space. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Callie let herself believe it. The nightmare was over. The sun dropped low behind the trees, painting the sky orange and pink, and the clubhouse compound glowed with strings of white lights that Bear had spent an hour hanging from the fence posts to the porch beams. Smoke curled up from the big metal grill, and the smell of barbecue chicken and burgers drifted across the gravel lot, making everyone's stomach growl. Callie sat at a picnic table someone had dragged out from storage, a paper plate of food in front of her that she hadn't touched yet. She was too busy smiling. It felt strange on her face, like a muscle she hadn't used in a long time. "Eat something," Donna said, sliding onto the bench beside her. "You've earned it." "I keep waiting for someone to tell me it isn't real," Callie admitted, "that the judge is going to call back and say there was a mistake." Donna patted her hand. "No mistake, honey. You did that. You and that lawyer and your own 2 eyes that never stopped watching. Nobody handed you that order. You fought for it." Callie's eyes filled up again, But this time the tears felt different. Lighter. Across the yard, Dominic was running between the biker's legs, laughing so hard he nearly fell over. Someone had given him a foam football, and 3 grown men in leather vests were chasing him in slow motion, letting him win every time. His little leather vest, the one the brothers had stitched a patch onto that just said Dominic, flapped as he ran. Uncle Bear. Uncle Bear, watch this, he shouted, and Bear scooped him up like he weighed nothing, spinning him once before setting him back on his feet. Tank stood near the grill with a spatula in his hand, watching all of it. Watching his sister laugh, watching his nephew shriek with joy instead of fear. Something in his chest, something that had been tight and worried for weeks, finally loosened. "You did good," Sam said, walking up beside him with a soda in his hand. He looked out of place among the leather and tattoos, but nobody seemed to mind anymore. Judge didn't even blink. The evidence was solid. "We did good," Tank corrected. "You did the hard part." Sam shook his head. "I just filed paperwork. You built all this." He gestured at the lights, the food, the laughter. "That's not something a courtroom can order. That's something you made happen." Tank didn't answer. He wasn't good with words like that. He just nodded and flipped a burger that didn't need flipping. As the sky darkened and the lights grew brighter against the coming night, Dominic came running up to Tank, breathless, his cheeks pink from running. "Uncle Tank, can I ride your motorcycle? Please? 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 Please?" Tank glanced over at Callie, who had looked up at the sound of her son's voice. She met Tank's eyes, and after a moment, she nodded. "Slow," she said. "Real slow, Tank. Slower than slow," Tank promised. He set his spatula down and walked over to his bike, the big chrome machine gleaming under the string lights. He swung a leg over and settled into the seat, then lifted Dominic up in front of him, careful hands making sure the boy was steady. "Hold on to the handlebars there, buddy. Not too tight. I got you." Dominic's small hands gripped the chrome, his knuckles pale with excitement rather than fear. Tank started the engine, just a low rumble, nothing loud, and eased forward at a crawl, circling the wide gravel lot. Dominic let out a shriek, pure delight, the kind of sound a kid makes when the whole world feels safe and fun at the same time. "We're flying, Uncle Tank. We're flying." The brothers whooped and clapped as they rode past. Callie stood up from the table, one hand pressed to her heart, watching her son's face light up brighter than any string of lights strung across the yard. Tank kept the bike slow, steady, careful, circling again and again, while Dominic laughed until he ran out of breath and just grinned instead. Wind in his hair, the whole compound glowing gold and warm around them, and as he rode, feeling the small body safe against his chest, Tonk made a silent promise to himself. Whatever it took, whatever came next, he would keep this, he would keep them. Safe, warm, laughing home, this was his family now. And he would never let anything take it from them again. The string lights still glowed above the compound, but the party had gone quiet and soft, the way parties do when everyone is tired and happy at the same time. Brothers sat in lawn chairs, plates empty, talking in low voices about nothing much at all. Somewhere a radio played an old country song. Dominic was asleep on Bear's lap, his small mouth open, one hand still holding a paper plate with a bite of cornbread left on it. Callie stood in the kitchen, rinsing dishes at the sink, feeling more peace than she had felt in years. The warm water ran over her hands. Through the window above the sink, she could see the shapes of the men she now trusted, men who had built her a life out of scraps and kindness. She smiled to herself and reached for another plate. Then, the pain hit. It came sharp and sudden, low in her belly, like a fist closing around her insides. She gasped and grabbed the edge of the counter, her knuckles white. The plate slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor, but she barely heard it. Another wave rolled through her, stronger this time, and she doubled over, breath catching in her throat. "Donna," she managed to say, her voice thin. "Donna." Donna Reyes came running from the other room, apron still tied around her waist. One look at Callie's face, and she knew. She had seen that look before, on other women, in other kitchens. "Okay, honey, okay," Donna said, guiding Callie to a chair. "Breathe, just breathe for me." "It's too early," Callie whispered, tears filling her eyes. "It's not time yet. It's weeks early, Donna. It's too soon. I know. I know it is." Donna knelt down and pressed a gentle hand to Callie's belly, feeling the tightness ripple beneath her palm. Her calm nurse's face did not change, but her eyes flicked toward the door. "Somebody get Tank." Now Tank was there in seconds, his big frame filling the kitchen doorway, his face going pale under his beard when he saw his sister hunched over in pain. "What's happening?" he said, though he already knew. "Contractions," Donna said, close together. "She needs to go to the hospital right now." Tank did not waste a single second. He turned and bellowed across the yard, his voice cutting through the last quiet of the night like a gunshot. "We need the truck. Now." Callie's in labor. The compound came alive instantly. Chairs scraped back. Men who had been half asleep a moment before were suddenly moving fast, shouting to each other, grabbing keys, clearing a path to the gravel lot where the truck sat parked. Bear gently laid Dominic down on a blanket someone spread across the porch, the boy stirring, but not waking, and ran to help push the truck's back doors open, wide. "Easy, easy," Tank said, scooping Callie up into his arms like she weighed nothing at all. She cried out as another contraction gripped her, her hands digging into his jacket. "It hurts, Tank," she gasped. "It hurts so bad." "I got you," he said, his voice steady even though his heart was hammering. "I got you, Callie. We're gonna get you there. Just hold on." He carried her toward the truck, brothers clearing the way, someone throwing blankets into the back seat, someone else already starting the engine. Donna climbed in beside her, checking her pulse, murmuring soft words of comfort. That was when the headlights swept across the gate. Everyone froze. The lights were far off at first, then closer, sweeping over the gravel and the fence line, catching the chrome of parked motorcycles and throwing long shadows across the yard. A truck engine roared, then cut off hard near the entrance. Doors slammed. And then came the pounding. Fists against metal, desperate and frantic, rattling the gate on its hinges. "Callie." A man's voice screamed from the darkness. "Callie, please, I need to see her. Please, God, let me see her before the baby comes." Every brother in the yard turned toward the sound at once, bodies going rigid, hands moving instinctively toward weapons and toward each other, forming a wall between the gate and the truck. Bear stepped forward, jaw tight. Someone shouted for the floodlights. Tank's head snapped toward the gate, Callie still in his arms, her face draining of color when she heard the voice. "That's Ray," she whispered, her whole body going stiff with fear. Tank set his jaw, looked once toward the truck where Donna waited, then looked back toward the gate, where the pounding did not stop. The gate rattled under Ray's fists, the sound sharp and frantic in the dark. "Callie," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Please, I need to see her." Bear got there first, moving fast for a big man, planting himself in front of the chain link like a wall of muscle and ink. Two other brothers flanked him, their faces hard, no warmth left in them at all. This was the man who had hurt Callie. This was the man they had all imagined, in the dark hours, beating with their fists until he never got up again. "You need to leave," Bear said, low and dangerous. "Right now." "I can't," Ray said. He looked wrecked. His uniform was gone, replaced by a wrinkled flannel shirt, and his eyes were red like he hadn't slept in days. "Please, just let me see her. I know what I did. I know I don't deserve it. But please." Behind them, the clubhouse door banged open. Donna half-carried, half-dragged Callie down the porch steps, Callie's face twisted in pain, one hand gripping her belly, the other clawing at Donna's shoulder. "It hurts," she gasped. "Tank, it hurts. The baby's coming. It's too early." Dominic came running out after them, still in his little leather vest, and then he saw the headlights. He saw the shape standing at the gate. He screamed. It was not a small sound. It ripped out of him, raw and terrified, a sound no 6-year-old should ever have to make. He grabbed Callie's leg and buried his face against her, his whole small body shaking. "No," he sobbed. "No, no, don't let him get us." That did it. That was the thing that finally lit the fuse in Tank's chest. He was moving before he even decided to move, boots hitting gravel, fists already curling at his sides. Bear stepped aside without being told, because everyone knew what was coming, and maybe some part of every man there wanted to see it happen. Ray didn't run. He didn't even flinch. He just stood there at the gate, hands open at his sides, watching Tank come at him like a freight train. "You don't get to be here," Tank growled, and his voice didn't sound like his own. It sounded like something older, something that had been waiting 8 years to come out. "You don't get to show up now. Not after what you did to her. Not after what you did to that boy." "I know," Ray said. "I know, just, please, hit me if you have to, but let me tell you first." Tank's fist was already rising. He was close enough now to smell the fear coming off the man. Close enough to see the way Ray's whole body trembled. Close enough to end this the way he'd wanted to end it since the moment he found Callie in that ditch. And then, Ray's knees buckled. He dropped straight down onto the gravel, right there at the gate, and the sound that came out of him was not the sound of a man begging for mercy from a fist. It was something else. Something broken all the way through. "My precinct is dirty," Ray sobbed, the words tumbling out of him in a rush like they'd been dammed up for months and the wall had finally cracked. "They're dirty, Tank. They're all dirty. Evidence, money, cover-ups. I found out and I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't tell her. If they knew she knew anything, they'd come after her. After Dominic, so I made it look like it was me. I made myself the monster, because a monster she could run from. But the truth would have gotten her killed." He was crying so hard now he could barely get the words out. Folded over on his knees in the dirt in front of the gate, a grown man broken open in the dark. Behind them, Callie moaned, a long, low sound of pain that cut straight through the night, and Dominic was still screaming into her leg, and Tank stood there with his fist still raised. Frozen. the world tilting sideways beneath him. The gravel crunched under Ray's knees. He stayed there, sobbing, hands pressed to his face, and for a second nobody moved. The whole yard went quiet, except for Callie's low moan behind them, a sound that cut through Tank like a blade. Tank's fists were still up. Every part of him wanted to finish what he'd started, wanted to make Ray pay for every bruise, every year of fear he'd put on Callie's face. But then Callie moaned again, sharper this time, and Dominic's small voice cried out, "Mama." That broke it. Tank's arms dropped. "Bear," he barked, "get the truck." Now Bear was already moving, keys jangling in his hand, boots pounding toward the old Ford parked by the garage. Donna rushed out from the clubhouse door, a blanket in her arms, her face tight with worry. "Her water broke," Donna said. "We gotta go now, Tank. She's not gonna make it much longer without a hospital." Tank looked down at Ray, still on his knees, tears streaking down his face, mud on his jeans. Everything in him screamed to leave the man in the dirt. But there wasn't time. Not for rage, not for reckoning, not tonight. "Diesel, Frankie," Tank's voice came out low and hard. "You two, escort him. He rides behind us the whole way, in his own damn car. He so much as taps his brakes wrong. You call me." Ray looked up, eyes wide, like he hadn't expected mercy. "Tank, I just want to see her. I just want to make sure she's okay. I swear I ain't gonna do nothing. Save it," Tank said. "You get near that hospital, you stay outside. Understand me?" Ray nodded. Fast. Desperate, yeah, okay, there was no more time to argue. Tank turned and ran for the truck where Bear was already helping Donna get Callie into the back seat, her whole body curled forward, gasping through another contraction. Dominic scrambled in right behind her, refusing to let go of her hand even as Donna tried to buckle him in. "I got her, Mama," Dominic said, voice shaking but firm. "I got you." Callie managed a weak, pained smile through gritted teeth. "I know you do, baby." Tank climbed into the driver's seat, knuckles white on the wheel. Bear jumped in beside him, already dialing the hospital on his phone to warn them they were coming. In the rearview mirror, Tank could see Diesel and Frankie's bikes rumbling to life, flanking Ray's car as it pulled out behind them, headlights trailing at a careful distance. The truck lurched onto the county road, gravel spitting from the tires. Every pothole made Callie cry out, and every cry made Tank press the gas harder, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. "Breathe, Cal," Donna said from the back, her hand steady on Callie's shoulder. "You're doing good. Just breathe with me." Callie's breath came in short, ragged gasps. "It hurts, Donna. It hurts so bad. I know, sweetheart, I know." "You're almost there." Dominic squeezed his mother's hand tighter, his small face pale in the dashboard light. "You're gonna be okay, Mama. The baby's gonna be okay, too." Tank glanced in the mirror again, saw the boy's brave little face, and something in his chest twisted painfully. This kid had been through more in 6 years than most grown men saw in a lifetime, and here he was, still trying to be strong for his mother. The lights of the hospital rose up ahead, bright and glowing against the dark sky. Tank swung the truck into the emergency entrance, tires screeching against the curb. "We're here," he shouted, already throwing the door open. Nurses were waiting, alerted by Bear's call, rushing out with a wheelchair, their scrubs a blur of motion under the harsh entrance lights. They pulled the back door open, gentle hands reaching for Callie, easing her into the chair as she gasped and clutched her belly. "Sir, are you the father?" one nurse asked Tank quickly. "No," Tank said. "I'm her brother." Behind them, Ray's car rolled to a stop at the far edge of the parking lot, headlights cutting off. He stayed inside, hands on the wheel, Diesel and Frankie parking their bikes on either side of him, watching him close, arms crossed, eyes hard. Dominic clung to Tank's leg as the nurses wheeled Callie through the sliding glass doors, her cries echoing down the hallway. The waiting room smelled like coffee and bleach. Tank walked the same 6 steps over and over, boots scuffing the tile, hands jammed in his jacket pockets, because if he took them out he was afraid of what they might do. Ray sat in a plastic chair against the far wall. Bear stood on one side of him like a wall of muscle and ink, arms crossed, and Deacon, another brother, stood on the other side. Neither of them said a word. They didn't have to. Their bodies said it plain enough: you move wrong, you don't walk out of here. Ray looked small in that chair. Smaller than a man with a badge and a gun belt had any right to look. His hands shook in his lap. His eyes were red, like he'd been crying long before he ever showed up at the clubhouse gates. "You got something to say it," Tank growled, not stopping his pacing. "Because right now, all I got is a man who put bruises on my sister and scared her boy so bad he screamed at the sight of him. I never touched her." Ray's voice cracked. "I swear on my life, Tank, I never laid a hand on Callie." "Then explain the bruises." Tank stopped walking, turned, stared him down. Explain why she ran. Explain why her kid was standing in the middle of a county road with a stick, ready to die protecting her from anybody who came near. Ray dropped his head into his hands. When he spoke again, his voice was muffled, wrecked. "My precinct is dirty, Tank, not just a little dirty. Rotten to the core, falsified evidence, planted drugs, covering up for guys who beat suspects who took money to make cases disappear. I found out 8 months ago. I found paperwork I wasn't supposed to see." Tank's jaw tightened. "And you did what? Ran home and roughed up your wife to keep her quiet?" "No." Ray's head snapped up, eyes wild. "God, no. The bruises, that break-in at the house, that wasn't me. That was them. 2 of the guys I work with. They came looking for the files I'd hidden. Callie was home. She got caught in the middle of it. I wasn't even there. I was working a shift, and by the time I got home she was terrified and hurt, and I panicked." Bear shifted his weight but said nothing. Deacon's eyes flicked to Tank, waiting. "You panicked." Tank repeated flatly. "So your answer was to let her run off thinking you were the monster." "I thought it was safer." Ray's voice broke down the middle. "If she thought I was the danger, she'd stay far away from me and far away from what I was tangled up in. If those men knew she was scared of me, scared enough to run, they'd leave her alone. They'd think I had no idea where she was, no way to use her against me. I thought I was protecting her the only way I knew how." He wiped his face with the back of his hand, ashamed. "I know how it looks. I know how bad I made myself look. I did it on purpose. I thought it'd keep her alive." Tank's fists curled at his sides. Every instinct in him wanted to close the distance and put this man through the wall. But something in Ray's face, something hollowed out and broken, made him hold still. "You expect me to believe all that?" Tank said, low and dangerous. "On your word alone?" "No." Ray reached slowly into his jacket, careful, showing his hands the whole time while Bear tensed. He pulled out a folded piece of paper and held it out. I've been working with the FBI for 4 months, feeding them everything I found. There's an agent. Name's on that paper. Call her. She'll confirm every word I just told you. I've been risking my life to bring these men down, and I couldn't tell anybody, not even Callie, because the fewer people who knew, the safer she'd be. Tank took the paper. His hands weren't steady either, not anymore. He stared at the name written in shaky handwriting, an out-of-state area code beneath it. He looked at Ray for a long moment, some war raging behind his eyes. Then, without another word, he pulled out his phone and dialed Sam. "It's Tank," he said when the call connected. "I need you to run a name for me. Right now." Tonight, his eyes never left Ray's face. "I need to know if this man's telling the truth, or if my sister just married the devil." He read the name off the paper. The waiting room stayed dead quiet, all of them waiting, nobody breathing easy, uncertainty hanging over the room like smoke that wouldn't clear. The waiting room smelled like coffee and cleaning spray. The lights were too bright, buzzing faintly overhead like a tired old bee. Tank sat in a plastic chair that was too small for him, his big frame folded down so Dominic could lean against his side. The boy had not let go of Tank's arm in almost an hour. "Is Mama okay?" Dominic asked again, his voice small and cracked. It was maybe the 10th time he'd asked. Tank had lost count. "She's real strong, buddy," Tank said, keeping his voice low and steady, the way he'd talk down a spooked horse if he ever had one. "The doctors are taking good care of her. And your baby sister is coming soon. Is Daddy gonna hurt her?" The question hit Tank like a fist to the ribs. He looked down at Dominic's face, pale under the fluorescent lights, eyes wide and red from crying. 6 years old. 6 years old and already braced for the worst, the way a kid should never have to be. Tank pulled him in closer, wrapping one thick arm around his small shoulders. "Nobody's gonna hurt your mama," he said. "Not while I'm here. Not while any of us are here. You understand me?" Dominic nodded, but his chin still trembled. "You did good tonight," Tank said. "You know that? Standing out there with that stick, guarding your mama. That was brave. Real brave." "I was scared," Dominic whispered. "Brave don't mean you're not scared," Tank said. "Brave means you stood there anyway." Dominic was quiet for a moment, chewing on that. Then he leaned his head against Tank's arm and closed his eyes, exhaustion finally catching up to him. Tank stayed still, not daring to move, watching the boy's breathing slow down until it evened out into something like sleep. Across the room, Bear stood near the doors like a mountain, arms crossed, eyes on Ray, who sat hunched in a corner chair with his head in his hands. Ray hadn't said much since the ride over. He just kept glancing at the doors to the delivery ward, jaw tight, looking like a man waiting for a verdict. Tank's phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. He shifted carefully, trying not to wake Dominic, and pulled it out. Sam's name lit up the screen. Tank's stomach tightened. He answered on the first ring, keeping his voice down. "Sam, talk to me." "I've been on the phone most of the night," Sam said. He sounded tired, the kind of tired that came from more than just lost sleep. Finally got through to the agent Ray mentioned. Special Agent Marisol Cruz, FBI, took some convincing to get her to talk, but once she confirmed who I was calling on behalf of, she opened up some. And? Tank's heart was pounding now, loud in his own ears. "It's real." "Tank," Sam said. "Ray's been a confidential cooperating witness for almost 8 months. He's been feeding them evidence on a group of dirty cops in his precinct. Falsified evidence, planted charges, money changing hands to make cases disappear. Cruz called it one of the biggest internal corruption cases she's worked in years." Tank looked over at Ray, who was still sitting with his head down, shoulders hunched like he was carrying something heavy no one else could see. "There's more," Sam said. "The break-in at their house. The one that happened right before Callie left. Cruz says it wasn't Ray. It was 2 of the officers he's been building the case against. They must have gotten spooked, thought he might have kept evidence at home. They tore the place apart looking for it while Ray was on shift. Tank's throat went tight. Callie's bruises. From the break-in, Sam confirmed quietly. Not from Ray. Cruz was very clear about that. Ray's been terrified this whole time, not just for himself, but for Callie and Dominic. He thought if he made himself look like the villain and got them out of the house fast, it'd be safer for everyone. Cruz said he's been begging her to let him bring his family somewhere secure for weeks. Tank sat there, phone pressed to his ear, Dominic's small weight warm against his side, and for a moment he didn't say anything at all. He just looked across the waiting room at Ray, whose eyes had lifted to meet his, searching, desperate, waiting to see if anyone would ever believe him again. The waiting room smelled like coffee that had sat too long on the burner and cleaning stuff that couldn't quite cover it up. Tank sat with his big frame folded into a plastic chair that seemed to groan every time he shifted his weight. Dominic was curled against his side, small and quiet, his eyes fixed on the double doors at the end of the hall, like if he watched hard enough, he could see through them to his mama. The clock on the wall said it was almost 6 in the morning. Outside the window, the black sky had started turning a soft gray, the first hint that the sun was thinking about coming up. "Uncle Tank?" Dominic's voice was small. He'd started calling him that sometime in the middle of the night, and every time he said it, something in Tank's chest cracked open a little wider. "Yeah, buddy. Is Mama still okay?" Tank had answered this question maybe 10 times already. He answered it again, just as gentle as the first time. "She's strong, Dom. Your mama's the strongest person I know. She's gonna be just fine." Dominic nodded, but his small hands were still knotted together in his lap, twisting the hem of his shirt. The double doors swung open. A nurse came through, still in her scrubs, her hair pulled back tight, a tired but warm smile on her face. She spotted Tank and the boy right away and walked toward them with purpose. "Are you family for Callie Holloway?" Tank stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "I'm her brother. This is her son." The nurse's smile widened. "Well then, you'll be happy to know she did wonderful. Mom and baby are both doing great. You've got a healthy baby girl." For 1 second, the words didn't seem to land. Then Dominic shot up off his chair like he'd been launched. "A baby girl? I got a sister? You sure do," the nurse said, crouching down to his level. "A real healthy one, too. Nice and loud, good lungs on her." Dominic's whole face broke open into a smile, the first real one Tank had seen on him in days. Not the careful, cautious smile he gave the bikers back at the clubhouse. A real one, wide and bright, his eyes shining with something that looked an awful lot like joy mixed up with relief. "Can I see her? Can I see my mama?" "Your mama needs a little bit to rest first," the nurse said kindly. "But I bet we can get your uncle in there soon." Dominic turned to Tank, practically bouncing on his toes. "Uncle Tank, did you hear that?" "I got a sister. I heard, bud." Tank ruffled the boy's hair, and for once, he didn't try to hide the thickness in his own throat. "That's real good news." The nurse led Tank down the hall a few minutes later, leaving Dominic in the care of Bear, who'd shown up sometime around 4 in the morning with a bag of stale vending machine snacks and a promise not to leave the boy's side. Callie's room was quiet, lit soft and low. She looked exhausted, her hair damp against her forehead, dark circles under her eyes. But she was smiling, really smiling, cradling a small pink bundle against her chest. "Tank," she whispered when she saw him. He crossed the room slow, like he was afraid of breaking something fragile, and looked down at the tiny face peeking out from the blanket. A whole new person. A whole new piece of family he never knew he was going to get. "She's beautiful, Cal. I want to name her Grace," Callie said, her voice thick with tears. "After everything. Because we made it. Because we're gonna be okay." Tank sat carefully on the edge of the bed, close but careful not to jostle her. "Cal, I gotta tell you something. About Ray." Her whole body went still, the joy in her eyes dimming just slightly, replaced by something wary and braced for pain. "Sam confirmed it," Tank said gently. "The FBI agent Ray gave us. He's real. Ray's been working with them for months. Undercover, sort of, trying to bring down some dirty cops in his department." Callie's breath caught. "The bruises, Cal, that break-in. It wasn't him. It was the men he was trying to expose. They came looking for something he'd hidden, and you got caught in the middle of it." Callie's eyes filled with tears, her arms tightening slightly around baby Grace, and she looked at her brother with an expression Tank couldn't quite read yet, somewhere between disbelief and a grief so old it had nowhere left to go. Callie stared at the tiny face sleeping in her arms, and for a moment the words Tank had just told her didn't make sense. FBI. Corruption. Ray. Cooperating in secret for months. "Say that again," she whispered. Tank sat on the edge of the hospital bed, his big hands folded together like he wasn't sure what to do with them. "The bruises weren't from him, Cal. Someone broke into your house looking for evidence he'd hidden." He panicked. He thought if he made himself look like the bad guy, the real bad guys would leave you alone. Callie's chest felt tight, like something was squeezing from the inside. Relief came first, a wave so strong it made her dizzy. "He didn't hit me. He didn't do this." But right behind it came the hurt, sharp and old. "He let me believe it. He let Dominic believe it. He should have told me," she said, her voice cracking. "I know. He should have trusted me." "I know, Cal." Tank's voice was low and steady. "I'm not saying what he did was right. I'm saying it wasn't what we thought." The baby stirred against her chest, tiny fingers curling into a fist. Callie looked down at her daughter's face, so new, so unmarked by any of this. Grace. She'd already decided on the name somewhere in the haze of labor, thinking of the one thing she wanted for both her children. Grace. A chance to start clean. She thought of Dominic, out in the waiting room with Bear, probably being taught how to fold a paper airplane or some other trick to keep his mind busy. Her brave, tired little boy who had stood in the road with a stick, ready to fight a grown man to protect her. He deserved a father who fought for them the right way. Maybe Ray was trying to become that. "Maybe. I want to talk to him," Callie said. Tank's jaw tightened. "Callie, I need to hear it from him, Tank, not from you." Not from some FBI agent on the phone, from his mouth. Tank studied her for a long moment, the way he used to when they were kids and she'd insisted on climbing something too high. Then he nodded, slow and reluctant. "I'll be right outside the door. So will Bear." Okay. He found Ray sitting alone in a plastic chair at the end of the hallway, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like it held some kind of answer. Ray looked up when Tank approached, and something like fear and hope crossed his face at the same time. "She wants to see you," Tank said. 5 minutes. I'm right here." Ray stood so fast the chair scraped against the tile. "Thank you," he said, and his voice broke on the words. The hallway was quiet when Ray stepped into it. Callie sitting up in a wheelchair someone had brought for her, Grace bundled in her arms. Tank and Bear stood a few feet back, arms crossed, watching everything. Ray stopped a few steps away, like he was afraid to come any closer. His eyes were red-rimmed, his uniform gone, replaced by wrinkled clothes that looked like he'd slept in them for days. "Callie," he said, and then his voice just broke apart. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for all of it." "Tank told me," she said quietly, "about the investigation, about what you were trying to do. I thought I was protecting you." Ray's hands were shaking. "I thought if you were scared of me, if you left and never looked back, you'd be safe from the men I was really scared of." "I didn't think it through, Callie. I was drowning, and I made it worse. I know that now. You let our son believe his father was a monster." Ray flinched like she'd struck him. "I know, and I don't know how to fix that. I don't know if I can." Callie looked down at Grace's sleeping face, then back up at him. "I'm not saying I forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. I don't expect you to. But these are your children too." She glanced toward the door, where she knew Dominic would be soon, maybe already asking Bear where his mama was. "And they deserve a father who tells the truth, even when it's hard, even when it's scary." Ray nodded, tears sliding down his face without shame now. "I'll do whatever it takes. Counseling, testifying, however long it takes to earn that back." Callie took a slow breath, the ache in her chest still there, but something else sitting beside it now. Something fragile, something that almost felt like hope. "Then, we start slow," she said. For them, 2 weeks passed like slow honey, sweet but taking its own time. The clubhouse had settled into a new rhythm. Baby Grace slept in a crib Bear had sanded down himself, the wood smooth as glass. She had a head of dark hair and a cry that could shake the rafters, but when Callie held her, she went quiet fast, like she already knew she was safe. Tank stood in the doorway most mornings just to watch. He never got tired of it. His sister, home, his niece, healthy, Dominic running around the yard in his little leather vest, laughing with Bear like nothing bad had ever happened to him. But something bad had happened. And healing from it wasn't a straight line. Ray showed up every Tuesday and Thursday, right on time, never early, never late. Sam had set the terms, and Ray followed them like a man walking a tightrope, afraid one wrong step would send it all crashing down. He went to counseling twice a week in the city, a small office with a counselor named Dr. Fenn, who specialized in trauma and guilt, the two things Ray carried like stones in his pockets. He'd sit in that office and talk about the fear that made him do foolish things, the fear that made him think being the villain was safer than being honest. He also testified. Twice, in front of a grand jury, laying out everything he knew about the corruption in his precinct. The names, the falsified reports, the cover-ups. It cost him his badge. It might cost him his freedom from retaliation, depending on how deep the rot went. But he did it anyway, because Sam had looked him dead in the eye and said, "If you want any chance at trust, this is where it starts." Ray took that to heart. Every visit with Dominic was supervised. Bear usually stood nearby, arms crossed, quiet as a mountain. Tank watched from a distance, arms crossed too, jaw tight, saying nothing but missing nothing either. Callie stayed close, but let Ray do the work himself. She wasn't going to hand him back his son. He had to earn it, one small moment at a time. At first, Dominic barely spoke to him. He'd answer in short words, yes and no, his eyes always tracking Ray's hands like he was still checking for danger. It broke something in Ray every time, but he never pushed. He just kept showing up. Today was warm, the kind of late afternoon where the sun turned gold and lazy. Ray sat on the porch steps with Dominic, a little ways apart, both of them quiet. Callie stood in the doorway with a glass of tea she wasn't drinking, watching. Tank leaned against the porch rail beside her, arms folded, saying nothing, same as always. "You want to swing?" Ray asked, nodding toward the old tire swing Bear had rigged up under the big oak tree. It creaked gently in the breeze. Waiting, Dominic didn't answer right away. He looked at his mother first, like he needed permission, even though nobody had told him he needed it. Callie gave him a small nod. Dominic walked to the swing, slow and careful, like he was testing the ground for cracks. He climbed onto the tire and gripped the rope with both hands. Ray stood behind him. He didn't touch him yet. He waited. "Can I push you?" Ray asked. His voice came out rough, like it cost him something to ask something so small. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then, barely, he nodded. Ray put his hands on the tire, gentle, careful, like it was made of glass. He gave it one soft push. Then another. Dominic swung forward, the wind catching his hair, and for a second, just a second, a small laugh slipped out of him. Not a big laugh, not the kind he gave Bear when they whittled together, but real. Ray kept pushing, steady and slow, his eyes never leaving his son. On the porch, Callie's hand rose to her mouth. Her eyes filled fast, and she didn't try to stop the tears from coming. "Hey," Tank said quietly, glancing at her. "I'm okay," she whispered. "I'm okay." Tank looked back out at the yard, at Ray pushing that swing so carefully, at Dominic swinging higher now, laughing a little louder. "It's a start," Tank said. Callie nodded, wiping her cheek with the back of her hand. "Yeah," she said. "It's a start." A month had passed, and the clubhouse did not feel like a clubhouse anymore. It felt like home. The back room that once held old tires and spare parts was now a nursery painted soft yellow, with a crib Bear had built from cedar wood, sanding every edge smooth so nothing could hurt tiny Grace. She was 2 months old now, round-cheeked and content, and she had a way of falling asleep on the chest of any biker who held her, no matter how tough he looked on the outside. Dominic had grown too. Not taller, not yet, but braver. He ran through the clubhouse yard in his little leather vest, the one Bear had special ordered with his name stitched on the back in white thread. He called the bikers his uncles now, all of them, and they took it seriously. There was a schedule pinned to the fridge, written in Tank's blocky handwriting, showing who was watching Dominic on which afternoon. Bear taught him to whittle. Ghost, a wiry man with more tattoos than teeth, taught him how to check the oil in a car. Church, the club's quietest member, taught him how to fish down at the creek. The two of them sitting for hours without saying much of anything, just enjoying each other's company. Callie watched all of this from the porch most days, a mug of coffee warming her hands, and she still could not quite believe it. 6 months ago, she had been curled in a ditch, broken and scared, certain there was no way out. Now she woke up every morning to the sound of laughter, to Dominic's uncles calling out to him across the yard, to Grace's soft coos from the nursery. She had color in her cheeks again. She had put on weight, healthy weight, and her eyes did not dart to the door every time it opened. Tank had changed too, though he might not have admitted it out loud. He still rode his motorcycle to the shop every morning, still wore his cut with pride, still commanded the respect of every man in the club. But now he came home. Actually home, to a house full of noise and mess and love. He had started keeping a jar of gummy bears in his jacket pocket because Dominic liked them. He had learned how to hold Grace so she would stop crying, bouncing her gently while humming some tune he did not even know the words to. He was a protector now in a way he had never been before, not just of the club, but of a family. His family. It was a Tuesday afternoon, warm with the last heat of summer, when Sam's car pulled into the gravel lot. He got out fast, his tie loose, a folder tucked under his arm, and there was something in his face, something bright and urgent, that made Tonk set down the wrench he was holding and walk over. "Sam," Tonk said. "What's going on?" Sam was almost breathless. "It's done. It's finally done." Callie came down off the porch, Grace on her hip, and Dominic ran over from the yard where Bear had been teaching him how to whittle a small wooden bird. "The arrests happened this morning," Sam said, holding up the folder like it was gold. 4 officers. The department head. All of them. The FBI moved in at dawn. It's already on the news. Callie's hand went to her mouth. "And Ray?" Sam's face softened. Ray's testimony was the backbone of the whole case. The DA is calling him a hero. Callie. It's public now. His name is clear. He's not just cleared of any wrongdoing, he's being recognized for what he did. For risking everything. Tears filled Callie's eyes, and this time they were not tears of fear. She looked down at Grace, who was gurgling happily, unaware of just how much had changed in her short life. Dominic tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Does that mean Daddy's not in trouble anymore?" he asked. "No, baby," Callie said, kneeling down to his level. "It means he did something very brave. It means it's really over." By the time the sun began to set, the whole club had gathered in the yard. Someone had fired up the grill. Someone else brought out a case of beer and a case of soda for the kids. And Donna arrived with an armful of casserole dishes she absolutely did not need to bring. Because there was already too much food. But nobody complained. Tank raised his bottle high, his brothers gathering around him, Callie standing close with Grace asleep in her arms, Dominic leaning against his leg. "To Callie," Tank said, his voice thick. "To Dominic, and to Grace. To family, found and made." The whole yard raised their glasses, bottles clinking together under the darkening sky, laughter and warmth filling the air like it belonged there. The sun hung low and orange over the clubhouse, spilling gold light across the gravel lot. Tank sat on the porch steps, his big frame folded down onto the worn wood, and in his arms lay baby Grace, wrapped in a soft yellow blanket Donna had knitted her. Grace was 2 weeks old now, with a head full of dark hair and a grip on Tank's pinky finger that never seemed to let go. He rocked her gently, the way he'd seen Callie do 1,000 times, and looked out at the yard. The compound didn't look like the same place it used to be. Sure, the motorcycles still gleamed in rows along the fence, chrome catching the last of the sunlight. The patches on the leather vests hanging by the door still said the same thing they always had. But somewhere in the last few months, the place had filled up with something it never had before. Life, laughter, small shoes left by the door. A plastic kiddie pool sitting crooked near the garage, half deflated, forgotten from an afternoon of splashing. Dominic was out there now, running barefoot across the grass with 2 other kids, Bear's nephew and a little girl named Ruthie, whose daddy patched wrenches for the club. They were playing some game that seemed to involve a lot of shouting and almost no actual rules, the kind only kids can understand. Dominic's laugh rang out clear and easy, the kind of laugh that didn't sound careful anymore. He wasn't watching the door for trouble. He wasn't listening for footsteps that might mean danger. He was just a kid. Finally, just a kid. Tank felt something settle in his chest as he watched him. Something warm and a little bit sore, like a muscle that had been clenched too long finally letting go. Bear ambled over from where he'd been flipping burgers on the big steel grill, wiping his hands on a rag tucked into his belt. He dropped down onto the step beside Tank, the wood groaning under his weight, and peered down at Grace with the same soft look he always got around babies, a look that never failed to surprise people who didn't know him. "She's gonna have this whole club wrapped around her finger before she can walk," Bear said. "She already does," Tank said, and Bear laughed, a big rolling sound that carried across the yard. Somewhere behind them, the screen door creaked. Tank didn't turn around yet. He could hear Sam's voice inside, talking with Donna about paperwork, something about the custody arrangement finalizing next week. No more hearings, no more waiting. Ray's name came up too, quieter, more careful. "Progress," they said. "Slow, but real. Counseling twice a week." A closed case with his name cleared of the worst of it, though the true reckoning for his department was still working its way through the courts. Ray hadn't been back to the compound. Not yet. But there'd been a supervised visit last week, the first one, and Dominic had come back from it walking a little taller, a little less afraid. Baby steps. That's what Sam called it. Tank was starting to believe in them. The porch light flickered on above him, warm and yellow against the deepening blue of the sky. Grace stirred in his arms, made a small sound, then settled again, her tiny fist curling tighter around his finger. That was when Dominic broke away from the other kids and came sprinting across the yard, his little leather vest, the one Bear had cut down and Donna had stitched patches onto, flapping open over his t-shirt. His face was flushed pink from running, his hair sticking up every which way, and he was grinning so wide it looked like it might split his whole face in two. "Uncle Tank." He shouted, the words coming out easy, natural, like he'd been saying them his whole life instead of just now, for the very first time. "Uncle Tank. Did you see? Did you see me run?" Tank's throat went tight. He looked down at the boy skidding to a stop in front of him, breathless and glowing, and something inside his chest cracked wide open in the best way a thing could crack. "I saw you, buddy," Tank said, his voice rougher than he meant it to be. "You were fast." He looked up past Dominic then, toward the doorway, where Callie stood with her hand resting easy against the frame. She wasn't gripping it for support anymore, not flinching at loud sounds, not watching the tree line with worried eyes. She was just standing there, smiling, the porch light catching the color back in her cheeks, watching her son and her brother and her daughter, all of them wrapped up together on that old porch step, surrounded by a family none of them had ever expected, but all of them needed. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.